All right. I think we'll go ahead and get started. The door's closing. Catherine really wanted us to start on time, but I think we'll have folks trickling in. I understand the lunch session maybe went a little bit longer, but hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. We're really excited to be here. My name is Natalie Cooke. I am a managing director at Accenture, and I sit within the Accenture Development Partnerships team, which is the unit of Accenture that focuses on social impact. So while we were thinking about what we should focus on today, we really wanted to do a different angle on technology and innovation and data. So today we'll be thinking about, yes, the opportunities, but also the risks and challenges around those specific topics. We'll touch on generative AI, we'll touch on interactive technology, we'll touch on the use of data, but we're really interested to dig into perspectives around policies to spur adoption, also around the role of the private sector, thinking about how we can help governments with regulations and focusing on inclusion through all of that. So I'm so excited to have some esteemed colleagues here with me today to dig into some of those topics. Maybe just to set the stage, we'll spend the majority of the time with me asking some questions and them responding. But we really are keen to reserve at least 10 minutes for you all to ask some questions. So be thinking of those, and I'll make sure to save some space there. So I think without further ado, I'll pass it to all of you to introduce yourself and maybe also touch on an opening topic around when you're talking with senior level stakeholders, what's kind of the top gap or risk that you often bring up when you think about responsible AI. So I'm going to pass it to David as a starting point.
Thank you very much, Natalie. I'm really happy to be here to discuss about this very important topic. Well, my name is David Brogeras. I am the head of digital transformation in the advisory service division at IDB Invest. Prior working at IDB Group, I have over 25 years of experience in the consultancy industry, and I've been an entrepreneur twice. So I had a chance to walk the talk and not just to provide some guidance to corporate clients, but also to implement it myself. So for the people that are in this room and the people that are watching us through the internet, I think that there is no surprise to affirm that AI is a technology that is transforming today's society as we know it. And as it has happened with all the disruptive technologies, it poses challenges and opportunities. So I'm going to set some, as I'm the first one on the line to talk, I'm going to share a couple of figures. According to Forbes, AI industry is expected to grow nearly at 40% until 2030. So this provides huge opportunities for both individuals and businesses. Understanding that individuals will have access to a lot of services that right now they cannot access to them because they are providing a faster and cheaper way through AI, but also for businesses, those businesses that will enhance their productivity and efficiency. On the other side, there are some challenges that need to be overcome. And according to IMF, it is expected that 65% of actual workforce will be somehow impacted by AI. So we need to look into that also. And we need to understand that there are many things that need to be in place before taking a full advantage of this technology, particularly starting with infrastructure technology, but having data to take advantage of this technology and also the talent needed to exploit it to the maximum. So I would say that that would be my first introduction and pass the word.
Thanks so much for having us today. My name is Addie Cooke. I am the Global AI Public Policy Lead for Google Cloud. In this role, I wear many hats, but I mostly serve our enterprise AI business. Our customers include private sector companies all over the world, but also include governments, which I feel like is a really important part of this conversation. How are governments going to use this technology to benefit their own citizens, but also how can they use it to keep the trust that their citizens expect, especially in emerging markets. Our research indicates that emerging markets actually have the most positive view of this technology. 71% of respondents think it's more net positive versus in America or in Europe, it's more like 50%. So that's actually a pretty remarkable number. But I also think while that is an interesting number in terms of the potential to innovate, it's also a potential indicator of how much trust they're still placing in developers of the technology and users of the technology. So they might have a 20% positivity gap, but keeping that gap high, or at least maintaining that positivity, is really, really determined by trust. Now, the other thing that I'll say, just to answer the question about, what is the gap that I see? What is the potential that I talk about a lot with policymakers? That is in tooling that supports our ability to understand what the technology is doing, what it's meant for, to be able to test against different impacts. We often think about bias. However, I also think scientific excellence, which is one of Google's AI principles, is a really key factor. It's my favorite principle, because if it doesn't work, then we have a lot of other problems. So making sure that we all, vendors across, Meta, from Amazon to Microsoft to Google, and including our integrators like Accenture, that we all have access to these tools, and especially our customers who are using them, be it government, be it enterprises, financial services, hospitals, whoever they are. Understanding how to control these tools, how to monitor these tools, I think is really important. And so standardization of these tools is going to be critical in this space going forward.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Natalie Heisler, and I am the North America lead. I'm a managing director at Accenture as well, a North America lead for our advisory and governance offerings in the responsible AI space. And I work with clients across North America to put in place governance frameworks for AI and generative AI. So in terms of biggest gaps, I'll first start by echoing what David mentioned about the opportunity. Definitely in the minds of our clients, the opportunity to better compete, to improve their businesses, to better customer service, all of the opportunities that AI and Gen AI present themselves to our business leaders is top of mind. But as top of mind are questions about unintended consequences, about eroding trust or the potential to erode trust with employees, stakeholders, their customers. So as much as our clients are thinking about the potential of AI, they're thinking about what are the unintended consequences, the questions, the possibility for harm. And so in terms of the gap that I see, it's an understanding and deployment of governance frameworks that bring in the tools that my fellow panelists talked about there, but also provide policies, procedures, operating model to scale the use of AI and generative AI in a way that is consistent with how the enterprise manages risk. So this is an emerging space. It's a gap today, but it's one that many of our clients are seeking to fill pretty aggressively so that they can scale the use of the technology.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Ayaz Minhas. I'm a privacy policy manager with Meta. In my role, I advise on red teaming, adversarial testing, risk assessments and governance, and product counseling around various generative AI products, and also some of our open source offerings. One of the gaps that I see is that as AI models continue to increase in capabilities, it's important that there are better evaluations to measure those capabilities and identify new risk outcomes. In the AI space right now, you have technical evaluations for certain types of models and certain capabilities, but the universe of evaluations is getting smaller compared to AI models as they get more capable. On the regulatory side of things, the risk assessments, you might have an approach with the White House executive order, which is focused on a certain threshold of computational power. And with the EU AI Act, you have downstream use cases of how the technology is integrated. But even those two approaches have limitations for risk assessments when you're thinking about a particular model's capabilities. So I think for all of us in the private sector, I think one of the gaps that I'm hoping we can all work together to fill is to build better measurement practices, guide our technical partners to build better measurement practices, and keep maturing our risk assessment work, especially as more AI models get more powerful and more AI models are integrated into existing systems. So thank you for inviting me today.
Thank you. Last but not least, Emily.
Yeah, great. Hi, everybody. My name is Dr. Emily Springer. I am an interdisciplinary sociologist, and I work as an independent consultant in inclusive AI and algorithmic literacy training for social impact professionals. So what does that mean? It means I work with organizations to help build AI policies and strategies. in the social impact sector, and then also that I run ethical AI bootcamp trainings to actually help development practitioners who are non-technical understand what AI is so that we can think about it really critically and thoughtfully and build responsible AI in our developmental initiatives. So I work currently with United Nations, the UNFPA Technology Facilitated Gender-Based Violence Team. I have worked with World Bank IFC, Africa Gender Innovation Lab, and DAI's Digital Frontiers. So the biggest gap that I think I'm seeing, particularly in the international development sector, is that we are so excited to get rolling, to get all of these big gains that everybody has talked about. And I think sometimes we're forgetting that algorithms are actually socio-technical. And that socio piece is so important because that's our bread and butter in international development. We cross cultures, we cross languages. And so we need to really understand what that social piece is. And when we see products like ChatGPT, it looks like AI can be plug and play. But if you ask ChatGPT about a good breakfast recipe, it's not going to give you injera friffer, which is a popular breakfast in Ethiopia, where I've done a lot of my work. It's going to give you eggs and bacon or something similar like that. And so we really need to understand how we can harness this technology for our particular sector because our needs are different. And in that, I think we need to get really real that we operate on tighter budgets, on project timelines. We're trying to do a lot in 3 or 5 years. And so we need to get really practical that with less resources and less sort of time, money, expertise, how can we actually make this work ethically and responsibly? Excited to be here today.
Amazing. Well, as you can see, we have a wide range of perspectives to share today. So I think to start us off, what I was thinking we could do is go back to Addie and Ayaz to maybe help us understand from your perspective in your organizations. People in the room most likely have heard of Gen AI and some of these technologies, but help us understand what your organizations are doing to help spur adoption through policies, and maybe specifically taking that to how are they doing that for low and middle income countries as well? What are some of the new things that you all are focused on? So maybe Addie first, and then over to you, Ayaz.
Yeah, sure. So just this spring, we put out our latest version of Google's AI Digital Sprinters report. We started this report back in 2020, and we continue to update it. This year, post-generative AI, I was really excited to contribute to it because the potential for generative AI in emerging markets is so limitless and incredible to me personally. I'm a returned Peace Corps volunteer. I served in El Salvador. I've actually seen what a mobile-first country can do with this technology. Putting innovation just in the palm of somebody's hand actually can change the way they interact with people and businesses. We've seen Meta serve up, small business operations through its platform. WhatsApp is a huge opportunity for small businesses throughout Latin America, at least. And so when I saw that generative AI, we are not only, innovating in the largest models we're creating, we're actually also innovating in the smallest models that we're creating as well. So putting generative AI models on phone, Gemini Nano is one of our technologies here in Google that we are added to Pixel phones to allow companies who develop on our Android platform and our Pixel phones access to using generative AI in the applications that they want to build it in. And it's sort of limitless. I think, I always explain this sort of as the iPhone moment. I remember when I got my iPhone. I do not remember when every single app in my iPhone became critical to my life. And that's the moment we're in right now where we see the iPhone, we see the generative AI, the apps that we're going to see created, we can't even imagine right now. And that's where the creativity comes in, and making sure that people have access to internet is still really critical. And then access to internet begets access to, generative AI, and it's the democratization that is coming through generative AI. You no longer have to learn how to code to use generative AI to create applications. You just have to know how to use language. Yes, largely in English, but I know Meta as well have invested in expanding very quickly our language capabilities. And we offer, with Google Translate, we're at over 100 languages. We continue to push into indigenous languages. All of these innovations opening up the world to more interconnectedness, I think is really exciting. And so that's really the view for emerging markets. But I just wanted to touch on one other thing, which is, its usefulness for particular cultures. I definitely agree that, a general purpose chatbot, like the ones we're all familiar with playing around with in the last 18 months, aren't fit for a lot of folks. And so the future, in addition to the specialized apps that we're going to see, the future is also going to be culture-based agents or industry-based agents that can speak to specific tasks, agencies that can speak to specific cultures. We've seen in Europe, the French are very excited about creating a French AI system, and I think you'll see that trend continue across the world. But what I'm saying here is that the foundation has been created, and now we're going to see the applications dive into serving very specific audiences. But we haven't seen it yet. That's what's coming, and I think that's what's the most exciting piece.
Thank you, Addie. And on our side of things, I think one of the practices that will spur innovation, both in the United States and globally, is our open source practices. Last week, we released Llama 3, the next version of one of our large language foundation models, under an open source license with some limitations. And we think that I think that's especially important because by releasing a model of that size and that capability and taking on the pre-training costs, that model can be shared in other parts of the world that might not have their own AI labs or might not have their own infrastructure to create their own foundation models. So broadly, we think that the more researchers, the more academics, the more red teamers that are experimenting with our models, building on our models and trying to improve them, that provides value for not only us as a company, but also the AI community globally. And that work builds on our fundamental AI research team's work for the past 10 years, who have not only been building generative AI products, but language translation products, language translation AI, computer vision AI, like our SEER model, which was trained on a variety of data to make it more equitable in terms of the experiences it can identify through computer vision. So I think our open source practices are a benefit globally, and I'm looking forward to seeing where Llama 3 goes. Now, as to addressing emerging markets, I think one area where I believe has supported emerging markets is our Llama 2 impact grants. This was a grant program set up around Llama 2, the previous version of our large foundational language model. That impact grant program identified 800 applicants across 90 countries and identified 20 finalists to support projects related to education, climate, and open innovation. Some of those finalists include one entity called Jacaranda, based out of Kenya, which created a chatbot around providing advice to expectant mothers in Swahili. Another example was at Nova Escola, which was a Llama 2 powered system to help teachers in Brazil create information and educational resources around Brazil's Common Core curriculum. Another finalist was Buzzworthy Ventures. They have an app called Be Kind, which is meant to support sustainable and ethical beekeeping practices, especially in tribal and rural areas. Another finalist was Digital Green. I believe that entity has been supporting agricultural work in India, in Ethiopia, and Kenya for about 15 years. They have an AI system meant to support agricultural practices in Swahili, in Hindi, in Telugu, and in English to support especially small farming communities. So those are ways that Llama 2, I believe, that impact grant, I believe, is supporting emerging markets. The winners of that selection process are going to get an additional $500,000 to support their projects. Some of them were in some of the finalists were in Meta HQ in New York City a few weeks ago, trying to refine and resubmit their proposal for final consideration in the summertime. So really looking forward to seeing where that goes, and really looking forward to seeing how Llama 3 is adapted in the future.
Wow, some amazing examples. Thank you both. Well, I think I'll turn to Natalie next, just to maybe share some perspectives around your views around the private sector and how they are helping to advance the SDGs through innovation and technology, as well as maybe speaking a little bit from your experience working with clients. You touched on it in your intro, but what are you kind of leaning into when talking about the different risks that are associated, or things they should consider as they start thinking about the steps towards Gen AI, or even before that?
Thank you. And I think Ayaz provided some great examples of private sector granting that also helps to advance SDGs in the process. So, when we think about the role of the private sector with the SDGs, in 2023, Accenture and the UN Global Compact co-authored a report that measured exactly this, looking at what the impact of the private sector was for the SDGs. And in that report, more than 94% of the executives still saw the SDGs, these are business leaders around the world, still saw the SDGs as a really important unifying vision. And we see that evidenced in their use of innovative technologies that have impact to the SDGs. So what are some examples in this space? So if you think about the role of AI in predicting the health of assets like piping in water systems, piping in energy systems. So predictive maintenance with AI is a fantastic lever to improve the lifespan and reduce the failure of pipes. Those pipes carry water, and so water loss, the impact of AI can really directly impact the loss of water. Also using AI to improve irrigation systems, micro irrigation versus flood irrigation systems. Those are heavily sensor dependent. So AI is really at the heart of that type of application as well. I think healthcare is really a standout example of where AI is making an impact to the SDGs. We have seen recently many research articles on how AI has been used very effectively to diagnose pancreatic cancer, breast cancer, a variety of other tumors. This shrinks the amount of time taken to interpret the results of a scan, a mammogram, or an MRI, or something like that. But it also provides additional insight. The AI can see patterns that even the most skilled radiologists can't necessarily identify. So we see AI shrinking the time and making the results of the scans more relevant to direct treatment. And I think what's really interesting is the doctors that are focusing on rolling out AI for diagnostic purposes in low-income or rural areas where there are not a lot of radiologists. So you may be able to go to a center to get a scan, but there's no radiologist to interpret it. And so AI can really assist in that way as well. I want to touch upon one interesting thing. Even though I share these examples of AI in diagnosis, it is still a little bit contentious in terms of AI always being accurate. But I was really inspired by the work of the American College of Radiology earlier this year, just in January 2024, that grouped together to issue guidelines. We see a lot of this self-regulation among professional associations. What are the guidelines we should use to drive the fair and accurate use of AI in really impactful examples of clinical clinical impact to human beings? So we see the self-regulation as well. In that 2023 report, just to kind of conclude on the role of private sector, there were 10 pathways in that report that were identified as where the private sector could focus in terms of advancing the SDGs, and innovating responsibly was one of those pathways, which was great to see. And so just touching a little bit upon Accenture's own internal responsible AI compliance program. So in 2016, we embedded AI into our code of ethics. And now for Accenture is globally more than 700,000 employees. We have a responsible AI compliance program that touches all the work that we do for our clients, all of the solutions and tools we build for our clients, and all of the ways in which we use AI internally. So we have a compliance program that helps us track and manage and mitigate risk throughout the AI lifecycle and gives us the visibility and the evidence to ensure that we're using the technology in a safe and trustworthy way. And so just to touch briefly upon clients, we work with clients to deliver the responsible AI frameworks for them. So when I say what is a responsible AI framework, what does that mean? It means, in addition to the tooling that Addie talked about, it is the right stakeholders in the room. The stakeholders for AI have really broadened in recent years. It's no longer just technical individuals. It's legal, it's risk, it's compliance, it's business leaders, it's customers as well. So bringing the right stakeholders together to assess risk, to make decisions about go, no go on particular use cases. Are they consistent with the enterprise's principles and values? And then once a decision is made to move forward with a use case, determining whether it's low risk or high risk and what are the mitigations needed to control that use case development, deployment, rollout, monitor it on a continuous basis as well. So having that governance system in place is what we work on. That's what we mean when we say responsible AI operationalization. It's the governance, the process, the tooling to ensure that enterprises can trust in the use of the technology.
Thank you so much. Okay, so great perspectives you've heard thus far. Now I want to shift to David to talk a little bit about his work with IDB Invest, particularly around the support around regulations for governments, and innovative technologies, and maybe some expectations that you set as you're doing those investments, thinking about what are the right things to be considering from a risk perspective. So over to you.
Well, at IDB Group, we have 3 institutions. I belong to IDB Invest, which is more based on private sector, but we have a huge institution, which is the IDB, which is versed on public governments and in order to support the development of public policies. So for the last 2 decades, we've been explaining the government, local governments, to understand whether the challenges of new technologies, starting with a fintech, talking about data, talking about cybersecurity, talking about blockchain, and of course, AI. So the way that we've been supporting local governments is opening the conversation, understanding that there is very little knowledge about these new technologies, what are the risks, what is the context, what are the different priorities that need to be understood in order to define new regulations. The way that we work with governments usually is bringing technology experts. We bring also some capacity building. We start working with the private sector and bringing the voice of the private sector to the public sector in order to understand what those needs, so that they are not gatekeepers, but rather gate openers. And we also support with funding. So the reason for this is that we want to support the regulation of the creation of regulatory frameworks that foster innovation, but at the same time ensures that there is a support of the needs that individuals need to have. So not only for individuals, but also for SMEs, there is a huge interest in how to support the way that both citizens and corporates are implementing these technologies in order not to leave anyone behind. So in the end, what we see from the public side is making sure that the risks are addressed, that we can come up with new policies that do not shorten the innovation, but at the same time, that we make sure that the well-being of the citizens and the respect for the digital identity and the digital divide that could increase with this implementation of these solutions is already covered. Now, from the private sector perspective, which is the one I'm more into it, I would say that for the last 2 years, we've been working on different research studies, and we found, interviewing over 150 different corporates, that the digital maturity that they have in order to implement AI solutions is not very high. I would say that most, depending on the sector, would be the 20% of the companies that we have already interviewed. They have enough maturity to start creating some pilots or some POCs that could take advantage of AI. Now, with this context, what we see is that we need to create the enabling capacities. We need to make sure that private sector companies and corporates, and both corporates and SMEs, are able to deploy the underlying technology in order to be able to address and take advantage of AI solutions. Just to give a couple of samples, we're working in Brazil with Hospital Albert Einstein in order to develop a solution that is based on the AI for a triage of leishmaniasis disease, in order to take a picture with the smartphone. So it goes through the different algorithms in order to understand whether or not it's a leishmaniasis disease, so that the treatment could shorten, and the impact on the people, and of course the cost of those treatments, it's also reduced. On the other side, within IDB Group, we have started to develop in 2019 an initiative called FAIRLAC for Latin America and the Caribbean, and FAIR with AI, in order to understand how companies are implementing these algorithms with a bias of ethnicity, of gender, of age. So what we do is we take the algorithms of the companies that work with us and understand what are, review the code, understand what are those potential biases that they have. So this initiative has grown, and now it's an initiative that is group-wide, and it's something that we're pushing. Every time that we talk with a private sector company, we present this initiative, and they are pretty much interested in how to reduce the bias that they have by using AI. Thank you.
That's a perfect segue to Emily. So we've all seen over time with the various technologies, exclusionary and unconscious bias coming into the mix. So would love for you to speak a bit about what you're seeing with that with regards to AI, as well as what are things that we can do as a community to try to solve against that.
Fantastic. Great. Thank you. Yeah, I love and appreciate all of the amazing examples these panelists have given about really exciting and meaningful ways to use AI. There's a lot of potential when we think about our social development goals. I would also say none of that really matters if we don't take the bias and the discrimination really seriously and start from that foundation and build from there. So I say that because if you've been following the news, you've probably been hearing about how AI not only reproduces stereotypes, but it actually amplifies them. And so as a sector, I want us to think really deeply about what that means when we pair that with what our goals are. So we've been seeing examples. So if we look at large language models, so text generation, as well as image generation, we're seeing a reproduction of stereotypes. We are seeing UNESCO just released a report the other day. The tech sector has known this for years, but it's always helpful in our world to have the UN tell us. So large language models are disproportionately associating women and she with things like housewife, homemaker, nurse, and not doctor. And actually, just a couple months ago, I was playing around in ChatGPT. I was using particular grammatical structures of sentences to try to test for sort of pronoun association. I could not get ChatGPT to recognize that in a sentence, the woman could be the doctor and a secretary could be a man. Could not get it to do, no matter how much prompting I did. And so a couple weeks ago, another news article came out that said, actually, ChatGPT is giving recommendations, even just based off of names. So if you're saying, what should the salary be for this person or that person, and you switch in different names, names associated with Black women get the lowest salary recommendations. This is not what we want as a sector. This is absolutely against everything that we are working for. And so it might be okay for a corporation to release a product like that. I would say we need to raise the bar in terms of what a minimum viable product is, because it should not be spewing out hate or inequalities in any way, shape, or form. That could be okay. That's not the corporate sector's ultimate mandate, but it is ours. That is our mandate. Do no harm. Do not reproduce inequalities. So if we're thinking about actually utilizing this technology, that's why I say I want us to start from the perspective of not reproducing bias and then build and work from there so that we can actually get that really strong, robust product in the end. So lots of times it's sort of a simple way to think about AI, but inequalities in, inequalities out. We think we have the privilege in this room to travel all around the world and see the inequalities that exist. So we know very intimately how unequal the world is. And that inequality is now embedded into data sets and been magnified by those data sets. To the second point, what can we do about it? Good thing is there's a lot of stuff to do about it. It needs our collective intelligence and our experiences as professionals in this sector. So definitely, I want to encourage everybody to be at the AI table. I think we have made amazing strides in the last couple of years in terms of getting more stakeholders at the table, as Natalie mentioned. Everybody should be there. If you are a backstopper, if you're a program manager, if you're a gender and social inclusion advisor, you have a role to play at the AI table. In tech builds, we often talk about collecting functional specifications, so really what you need that product to do in your business, and technical specifications. And I would argue that the non-technical folks, you have a role to play in determining what an AI tool should be doing from that functional spec piece. And that's why I'm so passionate about making sure that non-technical folks understand AI from a conceptual perspective. You don't need to know math, you don't need to know stats, you don't need to know how to code, but you have a role to play. And absolutely, the more that you learn about AI, I think that builds confidence. And to figure out which questions to ask on a cross-functional team are really important. And I would say all of us can do that. And there is a role for you to play in AI, even if you are not a coder. So I will end with that and pass back to you. Thanks, Natalie.
Thank you. Yes. Well, we were encouraged to offer sparks of hope along with the session today. So I think we've touched on some of that, but maybe just in closing before we open it up to questions, I'll ask each of you to maybe just reflect or repeat what you think the greatest opportunity is for some of these innovative technologies in advancing the SDGs. So Emily, I know you just spoke, but maybe I'll start at that end of the table and we'll go this way. So any final thoughts?
Sure, absolutely. There is one use case that I absolutely love, and I tell everybody about it. It's World Bank funded in Ethiopia. So in Ethiopia, and as in many other places, women have a hard time getting access to small business loans because they don't have any collateral. And so what a World Bank project did is they partnered up with a company and they built out psychometric testing. So essentially women were given a tablet and they would go through and answer, I think it was 45 questions. Several of them were pictorial in nature because you always want to be designing for inclusion in every single way possible. And a lot of these women are pre-literate. And then they used machine learning essentially to assess personality out of this psychometric test to determine, do we think this person should get a loan? And so they actually created a non-collateralized loan product that enabled women who otherwise didn't have access to loans to get access. So they were using machine learning in a way to generate new data about people and improve their access. It's not about taking what already exists, it's about changing what already exists. And I think that's the challenge for our sector.
Love it. Ayaz.
I think broadly, if we're looking at trying to advance AI globally and not just for the betterment of Western countries or regions of the coast of the United States, I think really durable public, private, and civil society partnerships, like some of the partnerships in this room, are extremely important, especially so AI laboratories can weigh and share different challenges, trade-offs, and issues that they're adjudicating. One example is the trade-off between data privacy and fairness, which sometimes to have a more fair experience and a more equitable experience, you need better data to train your models and systems on. So I think those lines of communication are essential for advancing the development of AI globally, and also for building better evaluations, better risk assessments, and better governance structures as well.
Fantastic. Natalie.
Thank you. I think to the sparks of hope piece, I just reflect on, if we roll back the clock, even just 2 years, bias was starting to be part of the public discourse and understanding, where inequalities were propagated, as Emily was talking about, was just starting to be understood. Today, there's much greater understanding. I think that the level of awareness among those that are buying and procuring AI is much higher. When we work with our clients now come to us, they come knowing about bias, knowing they do not want to propagate bias. They come knowing that they need structures in place to better address and manage risk. So I am very hopeful that between that, the growing awareness about the risks and the things that can go wrong, the desire that people have to not let that happen, and the tooling that is happening. Again, if I roll back the clock even 1-2 years, the tooling that was embedded in AI products compared to what is available today, there's a dramatic difference that helps us automate the safe use of AI. So I'm very excited between the combination of the public discourse, the public knowledge, tools, and desire among the clients we see to use the technology safely.
And I'll actually continue a little bit in that theme and just say that I see this also on the public sector side. It's slow, but surely we start to work with our government customers who are not only interested in buying our solutions, but they're interested in understanding, how does Google do AI governance? How do you vet products before you put them on the market? How can we think about mitigations that would bring the use of this technology better in line with our values? And certainly every country and every agency, every organization that puts this technology into use has different values that must be recognized. And I think that's a really exciting moment. I'll count that as my spark. I think government use of this technology is probably one of the most critical, not only for how it can benefit rather than harm its citizens, but also, government is often the start of AI scaling initiatives. So, part of the IDB's mission is making sure that this technology can benefit all populations, and especially in emerging markets where the average age is 26 versus the average age here in this country, which is about 40. I mean, that's a big opportunity for emerging markets to seize on. How can we bring this younger generation in these emerging markets to use this technology to grow the economic pie? That'll be my second spark of hope.
Love it.
And I will end there.
Amazing. David.
Yeah, thank you. So I will mention the lessons that we have learned for the last 5 years with this PEAR-like initiative I mentioned before. So what we have seen is that we are at IDB Group at the forefront on the different conversations related with AI at the OECD, at UNESCO, at Global Policy AI. So what we've seen in these 5 years is that there is a lot of noise related to AI. So we need to come up with a single voice to keep that noise very low. There are different actors giving some awareness of what AI could bring on the bad side, or what are the opportunities also on the good side. But we think that what we should do is to strengthen the conversations and bring into the table to the different private sector industries, bringing the academy, bringing the entrepreneurs, of course, bringing the policymakers, and have this conversation in order to bring in the private and public sectors to have a single voice. So that is like the best understanding or best learning that we have had for the last 5 years. We still need to push on upskilling and the talent that we have in order to take advantage of these new technologies. And the way that we are starting to work is by developing different pilots with both public and private sectors, so that they also understand the benefits and the risks related to this. So just one final comment. I believe that for financial inclusion, there is a huge opportunity there. I mean, AI is a big enabler to shorten the gap that has impeded for the last years, to have a wider financial inclusion for underserved and underbanked. And I think that this technology could be a good benefit for the people within the region. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, we would love to take a few questions. I know that we are coming up on time, so if you do have a question, we'll probably take maybe 2 or 3 to start with. I know that we can run with microphones, but we got a lot of questions. I think this is the start of the conversation, and much more to come, but.
Hi, thanks. I'm pretty loud, but I'll use the microphone. Michael Minkoff with Athena Infonomics. And we do some work around kind of inclusive and effective use of emerging technologies, including artificial intelligence in the context of development. We've had the privilege of working with Emily, who's just as great on projects as she is here on the panel. Couldn't recommend enough. I was part of a really interesting conversation yesterday around, focused on organizations and how they are seeking to manage generative AI risk within their organizations. And there's overlapping themes, bias, of course, being one of them. I've got kind of a couple threads I'm going to try to piece together quickly and succinctly. But so, one of the questions that emerged yesterday is acceptable levels of bias, right? You can't fully eliminate bias from these algorithms, but what are acceptable levels of bias? And I'm curious for the panel, what does that, have you seen that look different for, public sector versus private sector, and how is that conversation managed and approached? And the second, Addie, going to something you said early, which is the importance of building and maintaining trust with this kind of, to maintain this positivity gap, I think, as you termed it. How, to me, that's built in part on transparency about how we're selecting this acceptable level of bias, and how are you seeing that integrated into these approaches and conversations? And, David, your experience with IDB Invest and the private sector actors, I'm really intrigued by it too. Done.
Thank you. Maybe we could just take two more and then
Sure, I'll take it and I'll pass it to you, Natalie, because I feel like this is really applicable to you. I would just say, reiterate something I said, which is it really depends on the industry. At Google, we actually have governance and risk management by product. So in cloud, our risks are very different than YouTube's risk or search's risk or Android's risks. And it's actually the same way I end up talking about it to governments. The Department of Labor's risks are very different than the Department of Education. Even within the Department of Agriculture, you have the Forest Service, which is doing something completely different than the food safety folks. So risk management is at the level of use and the level of application. And that's why having risk management processes in place aligned to ISO 42001, which is the first AI management system standard, which will feed a new family of standards that will continue to guide us to evaluate our management processes globally and aligned to each other. So you can, if we have an auditor come in for ISO 42001, that audit should be the same as the next organization. And that can contribute to transparency as well, right? So eventually, once everybody is undergoing these management audits, we will be able to have a third party validate that we're doing these processes. And I think that's a more trustworthy, transparent world.
Yeah, I'll add to that. So in terms of the bias, as Addie mentioned, it's very use case specific. So there's not going to be one level of bias that's acceptable under any set of circumstances. But and the 42001 as well as the NIST AI risk management framework, they tell you need a process to inspect and manage and mitigate bias, but they are not answering the question about how much, how little. That's in a public setting is a policy question. In a private setting is going to be evaluated looking at what's the use case, who's impacted. We have clients who sit the lawyers beside the data scientists to look at that in a very integrated way, because there's a lot of fairness law that we can look at that brings together what is going to be fair and lawful with the multitude of technical fairness metrics that are out there for any particular situation to evaluate bias. So it has to be, as Emily said, multi-stakeholder view to managing bias and assessing what is too much, too little in any particular use case. It's a big topic.
I just want to add one quick sentence. I think I completely agree with everything that people have said when it comes to that governance, that AI governance piece within development organizations. I think we're being asked to come up with ways to use Gen AI in our organizations, but our organizations don't have that governance framework. Our organizations are not having the discussion, what is an acceptable level of risk internally to our organization or externally on a project or activity level. And so those are the conversations that we need to start having so that we can get ahead of this and do no harm.
close on time, but two more questions. So,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Chloe Schwenke from the Center for Values and International Development. I think one of the biggest sparks of hope we have is in this conference, in this room right now, I would say every single person here cares about the well-being of people. We're committed to universal human dignity. We exercise moral judgment. Now, as ethicists, we work in AI ethics, machine ethics, we call that, because AI does not have moral judgment. It simply does not exist in large language models. It's something we need to add through with algorithms, but it's not what I'm hearing. I heard a little bit, but not nearly as much as what needs to happen in terms of investment in building true capacity in machine ethics that's contextual, that's appropriate to the needs of different situations, and that really helps us to keep moral judgment within development work, particularly as we delegate more and more to AI and have less and less human intervention.
Is there one more? Yeah, let's do one more.
Hello, I'm the CEO of Benetech, Ayan Kishore. We make STEM content and content accessible for those with disabilities. My question is how, particularly we're talking about inclusion and making it, AI less biased. My question is, what is the role of our community, the international development community? When we go and talk to makers of large language models, they turn to us to get data to fill in gaps that they have, such as in our case, those with disabilities. So I'd love to understand what we think collectively should be the role of our community.
Sure, absolutely. I think one, we all need to educate ourselves. And I'm not involved in any particular projects in which I get to sit down with private sector folks. So if you're getting to do that, one, I think that's amazing and awesome. I do think when it comes to data and data inequalities, collectively as a sector, I would love to see us start working on socially inclusive machine readable data sets today, so that in 5 years, we can actually go back and provide meaningful data that accurately represents the communities we work with around the world. So that, I think, is a starting point that we should all be taking seriously. Donors take that real serious.
Yeah, I'll just hop in right there because that's exactly where I want to go. So we have a project called Data Commons that we run out of Google. It's out of one of our research and responsible AI parts of our business. And what I really love about it is we work with governments and large global nonprofits around the world to do exactly that, to open source the data. And as part of this program, what we do is we actually clean the data with the organization and try to absorb some of those costs. And if you do opt into the program, it becomes available to everybody. It's automatically cataloged and becomes database ready for anybody who wants to use it. So I fully agree that is one of the best ways to create new data sets that actually also open up new opportunities for those populations as well.
I think especially for low resource languages as well, ethically sourced data sets that are provided by civil society for languages that might not be available elsewhere to unlock translation capabilities for the private sector. And I think that's an extremely powerful value add.
I think we are past time. I know there's a session coming in here in 6 minutes, so we should wrap here. But just thank you all for your time today, for the great questions, and we're here to.
Yeah, please email. Let's all stay in touch. I feel like I'm so like stuck in my product universe now.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that she had like, you and Ayaz, plus like a nice balance.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.